Wasn't it Shakespeare who said, kill all the lawyers? What do you call a million lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. You know, I had a friend who just got the death penalty for jaywalking because he had a public pretender. You know, those lawyers. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good whatever time you're watching this. I've decided to do a new little strategy where I'm going to try to do a hook ya opener, which has been suggested of me. But today I'm going to talk about what I believe is the most honorable profession that exists. And it is the one I belong to, and it is the practice of law. And yes, I said honorable, not dishonorable. As always, I like to say if you're going through something, a mental health crisis, and debating a permanent solution to a temporary problem, turn this off and dial 988, which is the mental health crisis suicide hotline. Your life is more important than this video, and you are needed and wanted in this world. So, those three examples I started off with, the hook ya, I'd like to talk about those because every lawyer has had to sit in mixed company and hear their profession just crapped on and crapped on and crapped on. So if you're one of those people who like to point out, didn't Shakespeare say, kill all the lawyers? Be careful, because eventually someone's going to call you out and you're going to look very stupid. Because no one seems to ever talk about the context of that quote. They just say it. So what is the context to that quote? I'm happy you asked. That quote was in Henry V, Part 2. The quote, first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers, was said by Dick the Butcher, the villain of the piece, because he recognized that the only way to overthrow Caesar's government was to kill the people who kept the peace, was to kill the people who kept society from devolving into anarchy. That quote, every time I hear it, I cringe, because it's just out of context, because Shakespeare meant the exact opposite by saying that. Shakespeare, in all of his works, was very complimentary to the legal profession. So if you keep saying, that quote in a way to disparage lawyers, eventually someone's going to call you out and you're going to look really dumb. Maybe it'll even be me. Who knows? But the proposal to kill all the lawyers was the only way the villain of the piece believed he could rise to power. Now, what do you call a million lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start? Yeah, okay. That's funny, and I guess, although there's 1.35 million lawyers in the U.S., so if you kill a million of them, it's more than a start. You're almost pretty much done. But also, I'm going to talk about the mental health statistics in the legal profession, and that joke may not sit as well. Also, public pretenders. This one's somewhat sensitive to me because I believe that the legal profession is one of the most honorable professions. I believe one of the most honorable type of lawyers is a public defender. I'll tell you why. Everybody thinks that they get a raw deal. And if they were assigned a public defender, it's probably who they're going to blame it on. Public defenders have an impossible caseload. Public defenders, straight out of law school, are paid $48,987. Chances are they could probably find a job that they make more than that, either within or not in the legal field. But they choose to protect the indigent, oftentimes factually guilty, individuals from mob rule. And they do so at the expense of their wallet, at the expense of their own mental health, and at the expense of having any type of social life. Because based on a consensus done by the Delphi panel, this is about how much time a public defender has to put in to their cases, okay? High severity felony cases involving murder, sex crimes, so on and so forth, where the penalty could end up being life without parole, is oftentimes a commitment of anywhere between 99 and 286 hours. Mid to low level severity felony cases is roughly 35 to 57 hours. DUIs, those probably within 19 to 33 hours the lawyer will have to put in. Low severity misdemeanors, 13.8 hours to 22.3 hours. And ending with probation and parole violations, even those, a public defender, on average, will put in 13.5 hours. Now, there are caps on the amount of cases a public defender can be assigned. When were these caps determined? Happy you asked. 1974. 1974. 50 years ago. We're using 50-year-old criminal statistics to determine the caseload of public defenders today. But still, you have members who graduate law school, oftentimes with a lot of debt, oftentimes with many other job prospects, but still believe it's their duty to protect those who can't afford an attorney. Yeah, we crap on them all the time. We crap on them all the time. I like a good lawyer joke from now and then, but I'll never make a public defender joke because they sacrifice and just get shit on for it. Think about it. It's so thankless, but they do it anyway. And they do it with their head held high. I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite movies is Liar Liar. Love it. I love Jim Carrey playing the lawyer who lies all the time, but then he can't lie. And it's just funny, and it's hysterical, and it has about zero in common with the actual practice of law. If they were to make a movie or a TV show about my daily routine in the legal field, shepherdizing cases, reading over contracts, it wouldn't even make a second episode. It would get canceled at the pilot. It would be that boring. Bet you don't know what shepherdizing is? Look it up. Because this is not a how-to about the legal field. This is about the fact that lawyers and the legal profession is the most honorable profession that exists. Now, I don't mean to downplay the respect of any honest work. All honest work comes with dignity and should be respected. And that goes from food handlers, drivers, doctors, everything. If people are earning a living, they are doing it with honor. But find me another profession where everyone you interact with is adversarial. Let's think about a lawyer, just a random lawyer going to court for a DUI trial, okay? So he has his client who, no matter what, won't believe he is doing good enough. He will have opposing counsel who is there to oppose him. He will have the judge who will be on top of him to make sure he does everything right and by the book. He'll have his boss wanting to make sure that the matter is being handled. And if he has co-counsel, chances are there's some office politics going on. Imagine that same situation for a heart surgeon. Now, imagine if a heart surgeon went into the operating room and the nurses were trying to make sure that the surgeon messed up. And there was an opposing surgeon in the room trying to undo everything that the surgeon was doing, while at the same time the surgeon's boss was yelling at him, and the other doctors were trying to figure out how to overtake his position. You think that surgery would go well? I don't think so. I think you'd probably have someone dead on the table of a heart-related illness. It's the only profession where you really don't have anyone on your side, yet you are there to protect society as a whole. I want to talk about one of my favorite historical figures. Now, he was a president, but I didn't really like his presidency, but so I'm not going to talk about, he's not one of my favorite presidents, but I'm talking about John Adams. Anyone who knows anything about John Adams knows he was the most staunch advocate for American independence. He wanted us to separate from England more than anybody else, and there's a chance it might not have happened if it wasn't for the pushing and debating of John Adams. He despised the British. He despised King George. He despised the Redcoats. But do you know about the Boston Massacre? If you do, good for you. I'm going to give you a little refresher. The Redcoats had come into Quincy, Massachusetts, and there was a struggle. Obviously, different people gave different descriptions of what happened, but ultimately, shots were fired into the air, and citizens of the colony of Massachusetts in 1770 died. The next day, the captain of the Redcoats in Quincy, Massachusetts, whose name was Captain Preston, and 8 British soldiers were arrested. They couldn't find lawyers. No one wanted to deal with them. They were the Redcoats. They would have rocks thrown at them while incarcerated. So there was just mob rule against them. Except one person. I think you know who I'm going to say. John Adams. John Adams came in and said, they deserve lawyers. They deserve fair representation. What are we fighting for against the British if we're not going to treat our enemies, who at that point were countrymen, because independence had not been declared, if we're not going to treat our fellow countrymen with the same dignity of any other fellow countrymen, we can't divide up the ones we like versus the ones we don't like. So he, John Adams, who hated the Redcoats, represented 8 British soldiers. And eventually they were found not guilty. While I don't want to do an alternative history thing, pretty sure if John Adams wasn't there to be the protector of the peace and their rights, they probably just would have been killed. I don't even know if there would have been a trial. But the lawyer stood up and said, no, nope. If we can't represent the ones we hate, we can't represent the ones we love. Because Lady Justice is blind. Which then just leads me into every lawyer gets asked the question, how do you represent someone if you know they're guilty? Well, isn't that an interesting question? How do I? I have books that teach me how to practice law. Because when a lawyer goes into the courtroom, they're protecting everybody. They're protecting society. Now, sometimes society will come in the form of some not so nice people. Sometimes society comes in the form of rapists, murderers, so on and so forth. However, the second we get to pick and choose who's entitled to due process of law and who's not entitled to due process of law, we no longer are a free society. And sometimes I fear we're going down that route when it comes to things like the Patriot Act, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. After World War II, there was a bunch of Nazis that had been arrested and people didn't know what to do with them. And there was a conflict between UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Harry Truman. Churchill wanted to take them all in the back and just shoot them in the head. Clean, done, wham, bam. Truman said no. And keep in mind, Truman wasn't supposed to be president. Truman said no. They get trials. if we're going to execute them, they're entitled to due process of law. Now, there's a lot of controversy about the laws created around Nuremberg, which I will do a deep dive at some point. But even the worst of the worst, the U.S. president said deserved legal representation. And you know what? They all had lawyers. Now think about that. Do you think it was popular to be a Nazi lawyer at Nuremberg? I'll give you a hint. No, it wasn't. It wasn't something any of these lawyers put on their resume. Did they get paid? No. With what money? Their clients were arrested Nazis who a lot of them would end up getting the death penalty. You know what, though? 3 of them were found not guilty. Now, obviously, the Holocaust is one of the biggest atrocities in the history of the world. But if we just took the accused Nazis and just brought them to the back and shot them in the head, how are we any better than they are? And who came in to ensure that they were entitled to due process of law? That was the lawyers. Lawyers stand between society and anarchy. And we forget that a lot. Last year, Benjamin Beryl Fernandes, I think I pronounced that right, passed away at the age of 103 on April 7th, 2023. He was a highly decorated Nuremberg prosecutor. And he should be celebrated. He was an amazing attorney, and he represented the people who no longer had a voice because they had been killed in the Holocaust. And he's a man who should be honored and revered, and somebody who I have a great deal of respect for. And a lot of people know his name in the legal community. Bet you can't find one person who can list the names of one defense attorney in Nuremberg. Because after it was over, they didn't talk about it. They knew that if they talked about the fact that they were attorneys representing the Nazis at Nuremberg, they would be shunned from the legal profession and shunned from society and shunned from their families, when all they were doing was standing between society and anarchy. What they were doing was preventing the U.S. from doing what the Nazis did to the accused Nazis. And if the Nuremberg trials didn't happen, what was to stop just the U.S. and British, and at that point Russian troops, to just come in and just grab anyone they wanted to and shoot them in the head and say they were a Nazi? Even if they weren't. There would have been nothing to prevent that if it weren't for the lawyers. That's the little history portion of today's lecture. Now, I made a video a few days ago, a short, saying tonight I'm going to talk about why being a lawyer is the most honorable profession. And it's a few days later and I'm making it. Why is that? Did I lie on purpose? No. Because work came in the way. And this YouTube is a hobby as of right now. And what's my job? I'm a practicing attorney. And my workload just made it so I couldn't do the research and put together a presentation I believe you're worthy of. Something a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to the legal field is how difficult and at times, and I'm going to get a little personal here, demeaning it can be to become an attorney. We are, I believe, the only self-regulating profession. We decide who comes in the door, and we decide who we boot out of the door. Now, am I saying there aren't dirty attorneys out there? There aren't crooked lawyers? Of course, I'm not saying that. But those numbers are not higher than any other profession, especially in light of how adversarial and thankless the job is. Literally everyone is against you at that time, but we still protect the people. Let me just give you a little my personal experience. And I'm not going to go into that many details because I'm not ready to publicly yet, but I graduated law school in May of 2008. When did I get admitted to the bar? Anyone want to guess? September 2008? Maybe January 2009? March 2016. Now, yeah, part of this was my fault. I made mistakes, in my life, which I had to disclose, which put up some red flags, because the legal profession is so obsessed with honesty and integrity that they will do absolutely anything to prevent a bad apple from getting through, from getting in. So I had to sit around for 8 years, waiting, delivering pizza, having to tell strangers some of the most embarrassing things about my life. Stuff I'm ashamed of, stuff I may never say on YouTube. Maybe someday I will, I don't know. Having to go through ethics committees and only to get admitted and within less than a year be accused of something that was not my fault. I was working somewhere and something happened. I don't want to go into, I'm really not going to go into many details here, but a former boss of mine really dropped the ball on something, and my name sort of got tied into it. So now I have this beautiful new law license that it took me 8 years after law school to get, which I had to defend with my life. Now, being my specialty is not in specific legal ethic defense, I had to hire attorneys to represent me. Which was about, I'd say, after it was all said and done, $100,000, maybe $150,000 to keep what I had been waiting for 8 years to get. Now, we all hear about, disbarred attorneys, so on and so forth, and I'll readily admit there are attorneys who deserve to be disbarred. But when an attorney gets disbarred, you've completely taken away their livelihood. And that's not something to be celebrated. That's not something to mock or laugh at. It's quite sad. It's very sad, actually. So everyone's going to talk crap about lawyers until you're at the dinner table and a family member has a question. I'll give an example. We weren't at the dinner table, but I got a call one time from a family member who I had never met, not gotten one birthday card from my whole life, who I didn't even know existed, but somehow got my phone number and wanted me to help her in a lawsuit she wanted to bring against her housing association in Florida. Do you know how much I know about Florida housing association law? As much as you. Zero. But she was offended that I wouldn't take her case. Let's ignore the fact that I wasn't even admitted in Florida. But she just thought because I was a lawyer, I knew everything about every law. The expectations put on the profession are insane. And did you know that lawyers can get disbarred for practicing law? Ooh, how is that possible? Well, if a lawyer takes on a case which they have absolutely no experience, absolutely no knowledge, and puts in absolutely no effort to learn about, they are unable to give their client solid representation. And they can be disbarred for that, for practicing law. Now, if you don't dislike me enough already for defending those awful liar lawyers, guess what type of law I currently practice? People who know me know, people who don't. I'm a creditor's rights attorney. Wow, double hatred now. So wait, you're a lawyer, and we know everyone hates lawyers. Didn't Shakespeare say kill all the lawyers? But you are a debt collector? Which, of course, people will say with a tone of indignancy. Indignancy? I don't know what word that is. But you know what? I am damn proud of it. And if you think that creditors' rights should not have attorneys, I ask you to please pause this video, get a safe cup or something, and put all your cash in there and light it on fire. Because that's how meaningless money would be if it wasn't protected. Because we're not on the gold standard. We're not on the silver standard. We're on the trust standard. So the only way we can trust the value of our money is if there's people, attorneys, who make sure it actually means something. Because if not, why doesn't everyone just take out 1 million credit cards, jack them all up and not pay them because there's no one to enforce it and it's meaningless? Then your money means absolutely nothing. For some reason, that's been an irk of mine recently because I was very embarrassed for a long time to talk about the type of law I practice. And sometimes in mixed company, I say I'm in corporate law, which is true. But it's not given the whole story. And I wanted to give the whole story. Now, I once again I love watching lawyer shows. Boston Legal, The Practice, Suits, one of my favorite movies, Liar Liar, to Kill a Mockingbird, one of my favorite. I love lawyer stuff. But it's not real. You see, I've seen so many shows and movies where lawyers own yachts. I guess that's just like a thing. Lawyers are expected to have yachts. Guess how many lawyers I've met who have a yacht? 0. Haven't met, and I've met thousands of lawyers in my life. The average starting salary for an attorney is $66,892. That's not a lot of money for the schooling somebody has to go through in order to enter the profession. It's really not. It's not a lot of money for the responsibility to prevent society from falling into anarchy. And yes, I'm going to go that deep and say that lawyers prevent society from falling into anarchy. So maybe we can be a little damn nicer. Just a little. Because I want to talk about the mental health of attorneys. When I was spending those 8 years waiting to practice law, having had graduated law school and passed a test, I debated throwing in the towel many times. My anxiety was through the roof. I debated I'll do anything else. I was a multi-level marketer at one point. I delivered pizza. I did anything, and I really thought maybe this law thing, all the schooling, my life's dreams, it's not worth it. I'm not alone. There was a survey taken of 13,000 lawyers by the American Bar Association. 28% of lawyers suffer from depression. Clinically diagnosed depression. It's more than a quarter of them. 19% of lawyers have severe anxiety. And 11.4% of lawyers have admitted to suicidal thoughts within the past year. I compared that to the American statistics of just America in general. The percentage of Americans willing to admit that they have had suicidal thoughts in the past year is 4%. American lawyers, it's 11.4%. Society as a whole, 4%. Attorneys are always either one or two, sometimes three, leading candidates for substance abuse. It's sad. It really is. It's nothing to celebrate. But for some reason, it's the one profession it's okay to make fun of. Go to a dinner and make as many lawyer jokes as you want, and people will laugh the night away. Try making one teacher joke. Just one. I love teachers. My sister's a teacher. My dad was a professor. I come from a family that emphasized schooling and teaching. And you'll never hear me make a teacher joke but you'll never really hear anyone make one because teachers have the reputation of being honorable, and it's an accurate reputation. Lawyers have an inaccurate reputation of being dishonorable. I say this all just to say, maybe we should let up a little. Maybe we should try to be a little nicer. Because I don't know about you, I like living in a society of rules. But every society has rules. It's just a matter of, are they enforced or not? And it's the lawyers who enforce them. And the second somebody needs a lawyer, for some reason their opinion on lawyers changes 180 degrees. Yeah, I need you. Help me. You know, I still will get at least 1 or 2 calls a week asking for legal advice, for free, of course. You know, asking me to do my profession without compensation, which I now have gained the ability to say no. And that's to protect myself and you. Because if you're not my client and I'm not educated in what you're going through, I have no position to be talking to you about it and could put my license at jeopardy. Because we emphasize honesty so much in this profession. We really do. But back when I was a newly minted attorney or trying to become an attorney, yeah, I definitely enjoyed being that guy who people called. But that was ego. And that was me. That was an Ian issue, not an attorney issue. Now, I'll flat out say no. If my toilet's clogged, I'm not going to call a friend who's a plumber and ask him to come over and unclog my toilet without compensation. Does that sound very fair? I'll give you a hint. No. So, I just wanted to talk about lawyers today and what I believe is the most honorable, difficult, and miscategorized profession that exists. This is one I'd really be curious what people have to think, so please leave a comment below on this one. I've never asked for comments other than in a joking manner, but I'm really curious what people think when it comes to attorneys. Am I wrong? Are, attorneys scumbags? Are they all liars? Or should we give them a break? Curious what you have to say. There are going to be follow-up videos on this one. I'm going to be talking about Nuremberg. I'm going to be, once I feel more comfortable, talking about my own personal experience a little deeper. But all I ask is, just be a little nicer. Oh, and those people whose opinion changes 180 degrees when they need a lawyer, well, it changes 180 back to where they started when they don't. It's not fair. It's not right. So, on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. And if you really don't like lawyers, the worst thing you can do is not need one. Put us out of business. If everyone paid their bills, I wouldn't have a job. If no crimes were ever committed, criminal defense attorneys wouldn't exist. So, if you really despise us, put us out of business. You have the ability to. Make it so there's no market. Make it so there's no demand. I won't argue. I'll find something else to do. But it's not going to happen because society needs attorneys. Thank you for listening to me ramble this evening. I wore a tie for you tonight, too, because I was talking about lawyers. Take care, everyone.